I am Reverend Eugene Rod from France, missionary, publisher and author. And I want to present you this fantastic book I wrote about the Huguenot Prophets. These events happened in France during the 17th century. And it's such important, this impact has been all over the world. But just let me explain how this happened. So, first of all, this word Huguenot is mainly ignored in France, and their story is misknown. Outside France, most of the people are knowing the name Huguenot, but they don't know the story and how they impacted so many things in the actual world. So these people have been persecuted because of their faith during something as 2 centuries, from the middle of the 16th century to the middle of the 18th century. And during that period, 2 million people disappeared from France. According 600,000 have been killed because of their faith. According 400,000 immigrate in other European countries, most of them Protestant countries, and the other million try to board, to ship to other continents, America, Africa, Australia, and many died on the way because they were traveling in difficult conditions. But many arrived in different places of the world and brought a deep impact. Of course, they arrived with all their spiritual experiences, and it was not nothing. They have been imprisoned, jailed, persecuted during many times, so they were strong-minded people. In the same time, during this time of persecution, at the end, in the middle of the reign of Louis XIV, he took off all the liberty, all the freedom that have been given to the Protestants to worship their gods. At this time, so at the end of the 17th century, so the biggest wave of immigration occurred. But in the same time, God encourages people, manifesting different supernatural expression of His love. For example, it happened that some teens, during the night as they were sleeping, they began to speak in a foreign language, in a language they didn't know. And it happened that some visitors who know different language, which have traveled for the business, etc., they recognized the language and they were able to understand it. And in fact, these young teens were preaching the gospel as they were sleeping, and they were quoting different chapters of the Bibles, which they even didn't know in French. And so it happens not only one time, but many times. And it was very encouraging for the people. The same period, as they have to be hidden to praise their God, some babies, young babies, 4, 5, 6 months, began to prophesy in an understandable language, warning them, be careful, the army of the king is arriving to catch you. So flew, and I surrendered them in this place. And so it was encouraging also the people, because as they have been to the place where God told, I will surrender them in your hand, as it is happening in the Old Testament, you remember that? So it was true. The army was arriving. It was the best army of the world at this time. So when the army arrived, these farmers, they were not soldiers at all, not experienced to war. They was asking, what can we do? What are we going to do? And suddenly, angel choir began to sing psalm of victory in heaven, loudly. So the soldier was afraid, what's happening? And for these farmers, these Protestant farmers, it was the signal for them, and they were encouraged. And at the same time, many times, stones fell on the head of the soldiers from heaven. Wow! We are in Joshua's time, isn't it? And so that's what these people experienced during this time, God encouraging them. So they organized themselves in small group of guerrillas, maybe some till 400 people, sometimes 30 or 50, something like that. But so they were organized under the leadership of prophets, which were receiving direction from God and then leading this group of people. As the army of France was not able to fight, to resist against them, because God was giving them special strategies, they have to discuss with them to triumph over them. And so the general of the army, general of the Villers, received permission from the king to discuss, to negotiate with the main leaders. After a while, they received permission, exceptional permission, to leave the country with their family, with their belongings. So they established themselves in London, main of them, and so they have to organize themselves charismatic communities, because they were not well known in the previous French Protestant communities. They have killed many soldiers. They resist instead to be killed themselves. They were prophesying, and for most of their co-religious people, it was from the devil. So they have no other choice than to establish new charismatic communities all over Europe. They met at this time John Wesley. John Wesley, he was coming back from his first missionary tour in America, and he was totally discouraged. At their contact, and with the contact with the Moravian brothers also, Wesley found courage again to go back and to continue his mighty works. He found the Methodist Church then, and he was used for a great revival in England, in America, as you know about. Later on, this Methodist Church fell asleep, I will say, on the way, and so different groups have been found from this Methodist Church. And for example, the Holiness Churches and the Holy Holiness Churches. So it is strange, because Ivan Roberts, you heard about him, this Methodist pastor, was used by God for the great revival of Wales. So it was in this Methodist church founded by Wesley, who met these Huguenot Prophets. So the name Huguenots have been given to these farmers because they were fighting by night. So Huguenots could mean fighter by night. And they were called also Camisards. We are speaking about the war of the Camisards, because they were not wearing uniform, they were wearing just a simple shirt. So the word Camisard is coming from camisole, a local word speaking about shirt. So Ivan Roberts in Wales have been used by God for this great revival. And then 2 years later in Azusa Street, the great revival, or great Pentecostal revival of Azusa Street happened in a building of the Methodist Church. It was used at that time by this Holy Holiness Church meeting in that place. So this is how there is a clear and simple link between these Huguenot prophets till nowadays Pentecostal Church all over the world. According to what I heard, it is ignored, and I believe through that book I have to bring back the knowledge about these events. So the Huguenot Prophets, so this book will give you so many other examples what happened during this time. Thanks a lot. You can find it on the website, on Fnac or semer-info. You can find it in many places, in your bookstore, etc. Be blessed deeply. Thank you so much.